Welcome to the March 2025 committee meetings of Dubbo Regional Council. I advise that Council is now web streaming and its standing committees and council meetings live to the internet. And as such, all those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. Your attendance at this meeting is your acceptance of the condition that your image may be recorded and streamed to the internet, as well as being retained in the archive of the recorded council meetings and standing committee meetings. I now open the March 2025 Infrastructure, Planning and Environment Committee meeting, the time being 5:29, according to my one. Councillor Cowley will now deliver acknowledgement and welcome to country.
Acknowledgement, yes, quite right. Please join me in recognising that we gather here tonight on the lands of the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of the land, and join me in paying respect to elders past and present, extending that respect to other Aboriginal people who are present with us in the room and online, and hope that we have a productive and happy, harmonious meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. We now move on to IPEC 25/10, leave of absence. And so I have a request here for leave of absence from Councillor P. Wells and Councillor Richard Ivey. Can I have someone move that Councillor Wells' request and Councillor Ivey's request for leave of absence be approved? Councillor Shibley? And seconded, Wright, Councillor Wright. I now put the motion, and electronic voting is now open. Oh, thanks. Is it? Yep. I'll now close the voting. Yep. Stop voting. Yep. Okay. I declare the motion carried unanimously. Item IPEC 25/11, conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to declare? No. Next item on the agenda, IPEC 25/12, Development Activity Summary. Do I have a motion? Councillor Wright? And seconded Chowdhury? Councillor Chowdhury? Councillor Wright, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of comments and a question. Some great numbers, and I think we've seen a couple of those DAs simmering away over the last month or two on page 8. Some really solid figures there for the Sheraton Road and Cabora Road ones, Brisbane Street, Boundary Road. There's some really promising numbers there, and certainly brings the level of confidence to people investing in our city when there's those levels of dollars that are being sort of splashed around by other developers. But it was a question on the table on page 9, and it was just in reference to the lodgement days. Obviously, Dubbo sitting at 14. Pretty impressed with the number of DAs we assess and the timeframes that we do at average assessment days, but it's more along that lodgement days. I'm just wondering if you can give me a bit of an explanation again with respect to how that lodgement or those lodgement days work, and how do we get to a number of 14?
Through you? Yep, through you.
Yeah, and Mr. Jennings.
Through you, Mr. Chair. For the lodgement days, this is the process of where an applicant lodges their plans and their application in the planning portal, which is the state government system, which every council in New South Wales basically operates under as well. So this is the process there where the staff pick that application up, check its adequacy, and then also the other key thing not to forget is that we do send out the invoice for payment of the development application fees. So for that as well, it's heavily governed by when those fees are paid. and then also the adequacy of the actual application. You'll see there that some of the other figures which you see for lodgement days, I don't know with any great level of authority, but I'm guessing that some other councils probably don't sort of wait for that payment process to happen before they dig right into that application as well. So, but obviously, it's something that we are looking at as part of our continual improvements for how we do DAs. And yeah, for 14 days, I think we probably can do a little bit better there in our processes moving forward.
Thank you. Any further debate, councillors? Yes, Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a further question on that then. So the lodgement days, am I right in assuming then that if a request for some additional information does go out and additional information is then received from an applicant, those lodgement days reset and we're back to zero again, and council then try 14 days, I guess, to action that again? Is that sort of the way that works?
Do you?
Mr. Jennings?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the lodgement days are only in respect of whether an actual development application is adequate to be assessed. It's not after an actual assessment process has happened. So what happens there after an application comes in? There's usually a 21-day assessment process. It gets referred around to various areas of our organisation. So engineering, environmental health, and those types of assessment processes, and that's usually then if there's any further information required after the team's done that deeper dive into the actual application. The 14 days in that process there, that's only looking at if it's adequate for it to pass that first gate to get into that formal lodgement process.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Any further debate, councillors? Has there been none? Councillor Wright, would you like a right of reply?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks. I now put the motion. Electronic voting is open. Did I get mine? Okay. We're waiting for one more.
Councillor Richardson.
Oh, Councillor Richardson. There we go.
Right,
Yep.
so you can stop voting.
All right. I will now close the voting.
Click that one underneath. Yep. Perfect. Yep. Perfect.
I declare the motion carried unanimously. Item IPEC 25/13, Drinking Water Management System 2024 Annual Report. Do I have a motion? Councillor Toynton, and seconded Councillor Wright. Councillor Toynton, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say that with the PFAS, looking at the reports there, we do note that one of our bores is impacted by PFAS, and also that the Fire and Rescue New South Wales are actually basically saying that they are not responsible for the PFAS issue down at Ollie Robbins Oval, even though Ollie Robbins was the fire captain and they did all of the training down there in the fire brigade games and things like that. It's pretty obvious where the source of that PFAS plume is, and that Fire and Rescue New South Wales really need to take responsibility for that before it impacts further water drinking bores. And also just about the question about the comment, we'll just make a comment about the break in the mains over Christmas, where there was a lot of talk on Facebook about dirty water. I'll make it a question. Would we be able to get a quick explanation of that, please, for the viewing public at home about what happened there with the water coming out of people's taps that half a Dubbo saw on Facebook? Thank you.
To the CEO.
I'll pass that one to Ms. Eade, Manager of Water and Sewer Operations.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, there was a significant main break which was located on Whitewood Road. It did impact a significant number of residents in East Dubbo. Unfortunately, the main break did occur, which was on a Friday night over a weekend of the Christmas shutdown period. There was skeleton staff on call operating over that period. And it is noted that we may have been able to manage the communications better to the community, that there was a break and there could be dirty water or even low water pressure experienced over that time. It is noted that our immediate reception on call operators handled any calls that came in and had a script advising customers what to do if they had dirty water to flush their taps, and that council staff were working to rectify. But that is noted, and
Through Mr. Chair, I might just add, and so what we'll do, that happened in our shutdown period, and as we did last shutdown the previous year, we'll do learnings from that, and then we apply those learnings to how we set up our systems in place for next time.
Any other debate, councillors? If no one else, I would have a question, perhaps through the CEO. Can we get the addition of aluminium to test for in the water drinking quality onto that list? We have a long list on page 38 from antimony to uranium, and can we do that?
I'll pass to Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, to yourself. The figures or the tables that are included in the report are the health-based targets that are set, so that's why we report on those. And I will just refer to a comment out of the Australian Drinking Water Guideline that aluminium has insufficient data set for a guideline to be set up for health-based considerations, but there is an aesthetics quality of 0.2 milligrams per litre. We actually do test for that, but we don't report it in this because it's not a health-based target for the health report. I have got them on my phone. I can tell you what the range are. So we have the target of 0.2 for aesthetics. We did 29 tests through 2024 with a minimum of 0.005 and a maximum of 0.08, and the mean is 0.0334.
Thank you very much for that. Is there any further debate, councillors? There being none, I now put the motion. Start the voting. There it is. Yep, and electronic voting would be closed now. That one, yep. That's it. I declare the motion carried unanimously. Okay. Item IPEC 25/14, Water Quality Action Plan Update, 2024 Annual Report. Do I have a motion? Councillor Black, and seconded Councillor Richardson. Councillor Black, would you like to speak to your motion?
Oh, thank you. It really is amazing that nearly all of the time when people turn on their taps throughout the whole LG8, that safe, clean drinking water comes out. The effort that goes into ensuring that that happens is incredible behind the scenes, and we should thank our dedicated staff in that section for that. And I didn't realise till I became a councillor exactly what goes into that, but there's an awful lot to ensure that our drinking water supply is safe and available. And I'd just like to thank the staff for that and for the work that they've done in preparing this report in a way forward to ensure that that continues into the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Black. Is there any further debate? Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It was a question actually. Well, look, I'll make a comment first, and Councillor Black touched on it a few moments ago, and I know the public are compelled to air their grievances or air their concerns on social media, and obviously encourage them to continue to do that. That's fine. But if they do have a complaint with regards to something as important as the drinking water, I would absolutely encourage them to contact council directly and air that grievance directly with council, so that can be addressed individually, like like a lot of these particular complaints about water have been done that are mentioned in the report. So that is way for council to action those. But the question I had though was regarding the resourcing implications. It was on page 113 of that report, and the third line basically is down, says that the financial implications are not known until the actions are investigated. Obviously, we know that the balance sheet for Water and Sewer Fund does hold a significant amount of funds in restricted assets, which is used for asset renewal. But I guess my question is, with regards to some of these financial implications, if they are not known, what's our way forward with respect to financing, some of the items that might be unravelled as a result of this particular action plan?
Through the CEO.
And I'll pass to Mr. Ryan.
Yep, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. There's a lot of actions there. So there have been a culmination of recommendations that have come out of boil water alert debriefs that we've had. They are recommendations from that, and we've included that in this action plan so they're captured and not lost over time. There are a lot of these that are specific actions about particular treatment plants, but there's also some that are generic across the board of the treatment plants that we have. What we do is we make sure that we review these, and some of them actually get all rolled up into a study. So, for example, we've recently done an optimisation study at the John Gilbert Water Treatment Plant, which incorporated a number of these actions to make sure that what we're looking at is holistic, and it's also making sure that when we tinker with one area of the treatment plant, that we're not actually causing issues at the other end of the treatment plant. So they do all get rolled up, or they can get rolled up into a bigger study. And at the time of doing these, or putting these actions into the plan, they are unknown in terms of what the resource and financial implications are, until we actually dig deep and go, what do we need to do? How do we need to do it? And then that's when we start to formulate budgets, and that's what we put in our forward capital works program. But certainly we have investigation stages to make sure that what we're doing here makes sense, it's financially viable, and then we can plan for that in the future budgets.
So I'll just add, so councillors, when you see capital works, so what Mr. Ryan's detailed is that thinking that goes behind, and so it's not, we haven't captured everything in our forward capital works program, but there is that analysis and that, I guess, discipline in terms of what we're putting forward, because it's not very cheap infrastructure, water and sewer, so hence that focus on investigation and analysis.
Any further debate, councillors? All right. I now put the electronic voting is open. And I'll close the voting. And declare the motion carried unanimously. Oh, I didn't give his right to reply. You sure? Okay. I forgot about that. Okay. Sorry, Joe. Yeah, okay. Yes. Next item, IPC 2515, draft planning agreement, VPA 23-002, Maryvale Solar Farm. Do I have a motion? Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Black. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Oh, look, well done to the staff for to be able to go back to the proponent in this instance and just renegotiate that voluntary planning agreement. Obviously, what we're trying to negotiate here is for the benefit of all of community to compensate them for a lot of these projects that are being undertaken on the patch out towards Wellington. So certainly the increase in the negotiated value and the funds that subsequently come to community, very very well done to the staff. I think that's a pretty reasonable outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Any further debate, councillors? No. If there's no further council debate, I'd like to just add a question or a statement, perhaps. Page 128. We had some key issues and responses in the consultation process. There was 2 consultation responses that came in. The first one was to do with a concern that a resident wrote in saying that the United Nations 2030 agenda is focused on false science of climate change.
So you're reading from the waste strategy report, but this is
Oh, is it?
Maryvale. Yep. So we're on the Maryvale VPO.
Oh, sorry.
That's all good.
I've got the wrong one, have I? All right. Well, I better wait till later.
I'll reveal.
A reveal. So, is any further debate, councillors? No, there being none, we'll open the voting. And that's all done. Stop voting. And carried unanimously. And now, next item, IPEC 2516, the 2025 to 35 waste strategy. Now, there's a presentation that's being made. The Manager of Resource Recovery and Efficiency would now deliver a presentation. To the CEO.
Yep. So we just have the manager responsible, Mr. Lobb. He's just organising the tech as we speak, ready to do the presentation shortly.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So today I'm going to run through it's pretty much a summary of the waste strategy. So this is the 10-year waste strategy for council, kicking off in 2025 and extending all the way out to 2035. First, I'm just going to start with how the waste strategy has come to what it looks like today. So it commenced a bit over 14 months ago when we started preparing the waste strategy. And then once the draft version of the waste strategy was formed, we went to council late last year in August, the ordinary council meeting for adoption for it to go on public exhibition. The strategy then went on public exhibition in September and October of last year. And then the feedback that came back from that, there was amendments that were made. Most of the amendments to the strategy were structural, so the content didn't necessarily shift too much. It was just the arrangement of the strategy itself. And the main reason behind that was just to align and create consistency with the strategies that councils were generating. And then where we are today. So looking for the waste strategy to be adopted today, obviously at tonight's meeting. So a quick intro to why does council need a waste strategy? Currently, we don't have a waste strategy. The last waste strategy was conducted in 2007. So notably, there's been a lot of changes in the world of waste in the last 18 or so years. So definitely a much needed review and implementation of a new waste strategy. Like many councils across the country, waste is increasing, and particularly the amount of waste going to landfill. Two main drivers causing that, an increase in population and greater purchasing power, which obviously in turn generates more waste as we buy more as a society. A couple of the key drivers or key challenges in terms of how do we think about waste is trying to steer away from a linear economy and transition towards a circular economy. And the purpose behind that is to try and get as much out of material as we can possible, rather than just single life use. Historically, we buy something, we use it, we landfill it. So really starting to shift towards a circular economy where that material could then be reused for a second, third, and even maybe more life cycles after that. The waste strategy really is to generate an overall blueprint for council's approach to waste management. Waste is everyone's issue, it's not just councils. I'll speak a little bit more to that later in the presentation. And ultimately, the ultimate aim is to reduce waste to landfill and increase resource recovery. And there are a lot of tasks and a lot of actions and a lot of steps that need to be conducted in order to achieve that. And ultimately deliver a progressive, sustainable, collaborative and responsible waste management service across the LGA. Generating a waste strategy is a CSP action. So the snippet on your screen there probably the bottom line, the most important one, is the action itself to prepare and implement the local government area waste strategy. So that's how it first stemmed. The waste strategy itself was prepared in 3 sections. The first section being background information. Background information really did entail our current status. So understanding our baseline, how much material do we manage, how much material goes to landfill, how much material is diverted, how much material is recycled. And then looking at, or putting it all into context. So looking at what are other councils doing, what are the legislation and regulation changes, what are the forecasted changes coming our way as well. So making the strategy as relevant as possible. The second part of the strategy is the strategic framework. And this really is the blueprint. So this is going to identify what changes we can introduce and implement in order to achieve our targets and our preferred goals. And then the last section of the waste strategy is the implementation and the reporting of the action plan. The 2 guiding principles used throughout the waste strategy are the internationally recognised waste hierarchy and circular economy methods. And yeah, as you can see, the 2 figures on the right-hand side, these are used throughout the majority of waste management throughout, not only this country, but also worldwide as well. So the top figure is the waste hierarchy figure and the bottom figure being the circular economy figure, both fairly self-explanatory, same as a safety hierarchy. You want to start from the top and then, the least and most desirable is always at the bottom. The waste strategy is split into 6 key focus areas. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just council operations. So council manage waste across multiple areas. So domestic waste is your household collections, other waste because we have owned and operated waste facilities. Naturally, that's not just council operations that we receive waste, it's across all those 6 key focus areas. So in order for the waste strategy to be successful, all these 6 key focus areas will need to have their own targets. Each key focus area, as described or as pictured in the bottom figure there, has an objective, a target audience, what success looks like, and how that will be measured. So a really important feature of the waste strategy is the implementation plan, which I'll speak to a little bit later on in the preso. And it really does cover those 4 items for each key focus area. A waste strategy would be no good without an implementation plan, the actual actions. So the implementation plan really does spell out what actions we're looking to do over a short, mid and long term. The waste strategy extends over a 10-year period. However, the first part of the waste strategy is a 5-year implementation plan. The purpose of that is the waste world is moving at a rate of knots. So we didn't think it'd be relevant to set out a 10-year action plan if after the 5th year our other actions were redundant. So we're going to review our implementation plan at the 5-year marker and see how we're tracking and if there are any changes to be made or amendments to be made. That's a good time for that to occur. The actions will be reviewed annually though, because they're going to go into the operational plan. So every 12 months we'll have the capacity to review how we're tracking and how we're faring. And then obviously we can report back to that as well in progress. The waste strategy did go on public consultation in September and October of last year. We did have 2 feedbacks. We had feedback from 2 community members regarding the waste strategy. I'll speak to that a little bit later. So the feedback was, the commentary on the feedback was provided in the report, but not necessarily any changes were made to the strategy itself. The next steps for the strategy. So since public consultation is completed, again, as I mentioned earlier, we really did only generate structural changes to the strategy. So from the draft strategy that was first brought to council in August late last year, nothing has really changed except for the layout of the strategy itself. The waste strategy implementation plan and the items will be incorporated into council's operation plan for the upcoming financial year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. So, councillors, any further? Oh, we haven't moved the motion yet. So thank you, sir. Councillors, do I have a motion? Toynton, thank you. Councillor Toynton and Councillor Richards, thank you. Councillor Toynton, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems a great presentation. I'm keen to just know a little bit more about how all this is going to work. Once we sort of review, I guess the biggest thing is anything that can be taken out should be taken out. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this strategy unfolds. Thank you.
Yeah. Any further debate, councillors? Yes, Councillor Kelly.
Only a comment, really, just to say that, like a lot of people before I came into the chamber as a councillor, I was obviously concerned about waste, but as long as my bin was picked up and, you know, council did what it was supposed to do, then I was happy. But to hear that we haven't had an actual waste strategy since 2007, I find that extraordinary. And I'm very pleased that we do now, given the enormous role that council has in waste and the fact that it looms large with so many of our residents. But great presentation. Thank you very much, Mr. Lobb. And yeah, look forward to seeing how it rolls out. But yeah, just astonished that we haven't had one for nearly 20 years.
Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Black.
Thank you. Yes, a very comprehensive report. And as a council running the tip, we really do need to keep as much waste out of it as we can and get it recycled, because once it fills up, it'll be very, very expensive to start another tip. And if it currently costs $180 a tonne or whatever for general mixed waste, anything we can do to reduce the amount that's going into landfill and getting compacted is a good thing. And the tip shops, possibility of a tip shop would be a good thing. And also anything we could do to get more drop-offs easily for people in town. I know that you can drop off fluoro tubes and batteries and things like that, I think at the council chambers and also at the library. But anything else we could do to increase that, rather than people having to drive 20 k's out of town to, oh, well, you can recycle your shoes and things like that. I'm not going to drive out there and drop off one pair of shoes, but I'd probably go to the library or Hawthorne Street Depot or something like that to drop them off. Would be good in the overall scheme of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Any further? Councillor Wright? Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It was a good report. Yeah, very interesting, actually, and I think a lot of people would find it quite interesting if they read through that. I've got a question about FOGO processing. I did want to say that it was the biggest load of rubbish on a report I'd heard for a long time, but I won't. But the FOGO processing is my reference here. A lot of people wouldn't realise that while Andrew takes on that Midwestern and Narromine Council's feedstock for their FOGO, but there was a comment in there that mentioned that currently the maturation pads are already undersized. Expansion is required, and it'll potentially be required another 50 to 75% increase in size and the pad in the next 1 to 2 years. I just want to know if we might be able to talk a little bit on that, those expansion plans, and if we actually have room in that area to expand that pad. What needs to be undertaken to ensure we can do that.
To you, Mr. Dezo.
Thank you. Before I pass Mr. Lobb for that detail, it also was a topic of conversation at the Western Alliance of Councils. So there is going to be compulsory in the legislation for all councils to go to FOGO. And so whilst Mr. Lobb's talking about what's ahead of us as running the waste, there could be more demand on a central service like us, given our scale and the inability of some councils to do that FOGO. So it's a little bit unclear about that way forward for all of the Western councils, but it could put more demand on us. Mr. Lobb, to answer the question.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of infrastructure and footprint, there's plenty of space available out there. We'll just have to follow the due process of a DA development application and biodiversity offset, etc. The waste strategy really is the first component of transitioning across the futures. The next body of work will be master plans at our two main waste facility sites, so Wylandra and Wellington respectively. As part of the Wylandra master plan, FOGO expansion is in detail there. And as the CEO alluded to, I think Dubbo is going to play quite a significant part for other regional, smaller, maybe less resourced or even footprint availability councils. So when we think of our neighbouring councils with Gilgandra, Bogan and beyond, there's probably only going to be more feedstock of FOGO material to be processed at Wylandra. So, yeah, expansion is definitely on the cards. I think for us, it's just figuring how much we need to expand to allow for a buffer, but also not threaten the amount of... we'll still need to manage our own feedstock as well. So not to jeopardise that, but to still have enough leeway or room for other councils to also send their FOGO material to us for processing.
And just a further question with respect to that, and provide a bit of clarity, I guess, for listeners at home. I'm guessing we don't take on the FOGO material of those other councils free of charge.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. No, so there will definitely be a processing fee. Dubbo will not wear the cost of other councils processing their FOGO. It'll definitely be a pay-as-you-go system.
Any further debate, councillors? There being no, I'll just put a little bit myself. So I just wanted to, I guess it's more of a question. Page 128, the concerns that were brought in from the consultation process. One of them was about the concern about United Nations agenda focus on the false signs of climate change, and then the council responded that it's adopting with the net zero framework, and then that it talked about scientific evidence indicating human activities have been dominant the cause of observed climate change since the mid-20th century. Now, I know we have some extent, obviously constrained by what we can do in terms of state legislation, but I think my question would be, as a council, can we recognise the fact that the science now is showing that it is not the case, that the dominant cause of climate change is actually not man-made. Not to be woolly on it, the Journal of Applied Engineering, two professors actually confirmed that carbon dioxide can no longer absorb any more infrared radiation. What that translated means that you could double the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere without any increase in temperature. So that's the current science that's available today. So I'd like to see that something like that is recognised, as opposed to the current, shall we say, misunderstandings regarding what causes climate change. Natural processes are obviously far more influential. Just to make a point too, there was a CO2 is actually a plant food. It's not actually a demonic gas. It produces about 0.04% of our atmosphere.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yeah.
I believe we're getting information here that's based around misinformation rather than factual information. Now, I'm making a point of order to the chair and you're making the comment, so yeah. I understand that you may fully overrule me on that, given the fact that you're the one that has the ability to overrule, but I believe we're going into areas that we don't have enough expertise to be making these comments, and it sounds to me, from my perspective, this is a lot of misinformation here. So I'd call a point of order on the comments that you're making, and it's up to you as a chair to rule on that point of order. Yeah, no, well, thank you for your comment. I'd like to say that I guess the misinformation I would understand is actually on the part of those who support the carbon-driven climate change.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, you've got to rule on the point of order first of all. I've made a point of order, so you need to rule on that as chair, on whether you believe that's a point of order or not in the statement that I've made, believing that information you're bringing in is not relevant to this debate and not correct for you to be bringing that misinformation in. So you're the chair, you need to rule on my point of order.
Okay, so I'd guess I'd rule that it's not a point of order. Is that okay?
If that's your ruling, that's it's not okay by me, but that's your ruling, so I will abide by your ruling.
No, thank you for that. All right. So the misinformation that the esteemed colleague referring to is actually scientifically based. And as I just referred you to the journal currently that has shown that information, and that's a scientifically accepted journal. It's like I said, we in the past we certainly were led to believe that carbon dioxide was a driver of climate change. Now that recent science has shown the other to be opposite, I think we need to adjust our responses to our customers in that regard. The IPCC is often quoted. I'd like to point out that the IPCC has unfortunately not been the most, how would you call it, factually based. I refer you to ClimateGate, where they were emailing each other saying, how can we make the public fear so that we can get these policies across the line. Also, the infamous graph by Michael Mann that showed the hockey stick. If you want to look these all up at home, you may. But what it did was actually extrapolate current warming trends into the future without the understanding that our climate does actually moderate itself in warming and cooling cycles. So to extrapolate data from a warming part of the curve and then cause to be an alarmist position is unfortunately a misuse of science. So the question, getting back to it, is can we as council, in reply to this man who raised the objection, we could perhaps put it in such a way as saying that we are constrained by perhaps state and federal government, but certainly not to include things like, which is untrue, scientific evidence indicating that human activities have been dominant cause of observed climate change since the mid-20th century. So who would I ask that to, CEO? All right, through the CEO, please.
So I would ask councillors to read carefully the council response. What it refers to is the adopted, so that's a council formal policy of the net zero framework for council operations. So the staff are referring to an existing policy. And that policy then went through that detail. Now, we can get into a debate, but the vast weight of science, so that's the vast majority of reports, support human-induced climate change, and that is what fed the net zero framework that's been a policy setting of council. So that is why that reference is there as well. If you take that and you look at the federal government and state government positions, we would be remiss in terms of managing our landfill if we ignored the risk, because if there is, and there has been in the past, a price or a penalty for having carbon, our largest area of carbon emissions is landfill, and that's targeted by state government policy, the EPA. So we would be remiss in terms of protecting our community resource if we didn't try and continue to keep that out of our system, because there may be a penalty in the future that has been in the past. So in that regulatory context, I think that's an accurate statement to the proponent, whilst others may disagree. So it's a policy setting and also a regulatory framework in which waste operates. So it's important that we acknowledge the context of which that statement was made.
Thank you to the CEO for that answer. Is there any further debate, councillors? Have you a hand up there, Councillor Richardson? Is that? Oh, okay. Sorry, just checking. There being no further debate, let's start the voting. I'll just now close the voting and announce it carried unanimously. The next item on the agenda is IPC 25/17, Ride to Give 2025. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Councillor Cowley. Seconded, Councillor Chibling. Councillor Cowley, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. This only to say that the report can be taken as read, and that the request, the Ride to Give is a charity ride from Dubbo to Leeton, and the request from the organisers of the Ride to Give to use roads within our LGA came before the Traffic Committee, and the recommendation is that the council approval be granted contingent upon the conditions listed being met.
Is there any further debate, councillors? There being none, we'll open the voting. And closing the voting. Carried unanimously. Next item, IPEC 25/18, the 2025 Anzac Day ceremonies, Dubbo local government area. Do I have a motion? Councillor Cowley. And a seconder? Councillor Ryan. Councillor Cowley, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. Again, just to say that the motion came, or the report came before the Traffic Committee, that the Anzac Day ceremonies across the LGA in Dubbo, Wellington and Stewart Town, seeking approval to be granted for the RSL sub-branches and the various Anzac Day committees to be able to use council roads subject to council's conditions and the traffic management therefore, and the recommendation is that those approvals be granted.
Any further debate, councillors? There being none, we now open the voting. Close the voting. And declare the motion carried unanimously. Item IPEC 25/19, 2025 Wellington Boot, traffic management for Bush Rangers Creek Road, Wellington. Do I have a motion? Councillor Kelly again. And seconder? Shibley, Councillor Shibley. Councillor Cowley, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, that the council approved the report as tabled came before the Traffic Committee, with the Wellington Race Club seeking permission, approval to implement the traffic management plan to conduct what is a very important local event for Wellington, that being the Wellington Boot. And as per the report, the recommendation is that the approval be granted for the organisers, again, subject to the conditions set out by council.
Thank you, Councillor Cowley. Any further debate? There being no further debate, I'll open the voting. Thank you. I'll close the voting. We declare the motion carried unanimously. Item 1, it says, as there are no further items, I declare the Infrastructure Planning and Environment Committee closed, the time being 18:16. I now call on Councillor Black to chair the Culture and Community Committee meeting. Thank you, Councillor Black.
I now open the March 2025 Culture and Community Committee meeting, the time being 6:20 p.m. First item is CCL 25/7, leave of absence. I have requests for leave of absences from Councillor Wells and Councillor Ivey. Can I have someone move that Councillor Wells and Councillor Ivey's requests for leave of absence be approved? Moved by Councillor Ryan, seconded by Councillor Wright. I now put the motion. I'll open the electronic voting. Please cast your votes. I'll now close the voting. Carried unanimously. Item CCC 25/8 is conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, the next item is item CCC 25/9, Crown Lands Plans of Management, Old Dubbo Jail and Victoria Park. Do I have someone to move that motion, please? Councillor Richardson, second by Councillor Butler. Councillor Richardson, would you like to speak to that motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Only a comment that I just encourage the community to take a look at this document when it goes on public exhibition for 42 days, should this motion be passed here shortly. Look, the Victoria Park Precinct and the Old Dubbo Jail Precinct are both very, very important pieces of infrastructure that the community owns, and so their feedback with respect to both of these is really important. So, so please, if you do have the chance to take the time and provide some feedback, that would be appreciated by councillors and staff, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cowley.
Councillor Wright took the words right out of my mouth. I would be delighted to see everybody engage with this these plans for both of these facilities. I'm also really happy to see the, particularly in terms of the park, Victoria Park Precinct, the repeated focus on respect for cultural heritage. We've come to think of cultural heritage in terms of our First Nations people, but the Victoria Park Precinct has a long and proud history and a real place in the psyche, particularly of those who grew up here and across our city's history. I remember coming here as a child from beautiful downtown Turawena and in the 70s and having the little wombat in the zoo there nibble on my toe and my shoe. So, but it has a wonderful place in the heart of very many people, and so that respecting the cultural heritage as the plans change for the precinct is really important. And I wonder if there's I'd like to see as much interpretive interpretation of that history included as we possibly can, and perhaps maybe there's room for a digital experience for visitors to that park to learn the history and the progression and the timelines. But congratulations to all on the plan. It's a ripper.
Thank you. Any further comment, debate, councillors? Councillor Wright. Oh, well, I'll make a quick comment then back to Councillor Wright, will I? Only to say, could say anything. Only to say that it's a very interesting read for people on the history of Victoria Park, right from being a swamp and where it used to be up over the railway line to the north, that then got then got it put back into the railway, and it got greatly reduced. But the history of the area with the local Aboriginal people, where the swamp used to go down through from up in the RAF down through there, and it would have joined up into the river eventually, is a very interesting read. And anything we can do to keep that alive so that people realise what used to be there and why we have that park right in the middle of town now is a good thing. And also I did work experience there in like about 1993 or 4 when I was at South Dubbo High School with the plant propagator, when council used to have the depot down there for parks and gardens and had a plant propagator. So, thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I thought you might have touched on it. There's obviously a couple of users of the park, and I know there was a reference in there with respect to the men's shed, and I'm sure the men's shed, they've expressed some concerns about their future in there, and I'm just wondering if you might be able to elaborate a little bit more on how council would engage with some of those stakeholders. Obviously, they have an opportunity to provide some feedback here, but how would council going forward engage with those stakeholders within that precinct of Victoria Park?
To the CEO.
Yep, I'll just add more before I throw to Mr. McAllister. So firstly, plans to manage for Crown land are very prescriptive. If you don't have it in the plan to manage it, you can't do it. So that's why we're calling out a potential future consideration in the plans of management about location mentioned. It's not saying thou shalt, but we have to have that in there if it's something we want to consider. But I'll throw to Mr. McAllister for more detail and some of the constraints around the men's shed now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd certainly be looking at engaging with the key stakeholders, which includes the men's sheds and the Orchid Society. We certainly want to ensure that they understand what the plan is about and how to move forward. We don't certainly want to ambush them and feel that they are being pushed out. That's not the intent of the plan. As the CEO mentioned, it's really about ensuring that we have the flexibility in the future to manage the park for the betterment of the broader community.
Back to the CEO.
Yeah, so and in terms of the men's shed, so it is site constrained. They'd love to expand and grow, but that means they're taking over more of the parkland itself. So is that the right future solution, or is there a more bespoke solution for a men's shed? So we're calling out that's a future consideration in that regard.
Thank you. Any further comment or debate, councillors? There being none, back to the mover. Councillor Richardson for a right of reply to anything there.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll now put the motion. Please cast your electronic votes. I'll now close the voting. Carried unanimously. As there are no further items, I declare the Culture and Community Committee meeting closed, the time being 6:27 p.m. I now call on Councillor Richardson, the Chair to Corporate Services Committee meeting.
I now open the March 2025 Corporate Services Committee meeting, the time being 6:28 p.m. I have item CSC 25/11, leave of absence. I have a request for leave of absence from councillors P. Wells and R. Ivy. Can I have someone move that Councillor Wells and Ivy requests for leave of absence be approved? Councillor Ryan, and seconded Councillor Wright. I'll put the motion, and electronic voting is now open. Oh, fine.
9. Yep, good. Then
Yep.
that little pilot box.
This one?
Yep.
Yep. I'll now close the voting.
Done.
Okay. I declare the motion carried unanimously. Next item is CSC 25/12. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to declare? Nope. Next item is CSC 25/13, a review of the 2023 to 2027 Community Engagement Strategy in response to legislative and post-election requirements. Do I have a motion for this? Yep, Councillor Wright. Seconded, Councillor Black. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, not for this one. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further debate? Okay. I'll now put the motion to electronic voting. Councillor Chowdhury? You haven't voted. Thank you. I'll now stop the voting. And that motion's carried unanimously. Pretty cool. CSC 25/14, Council Community Committees, Terms of Reference and Determination of Councillor Representation.
So, Madam Chair, I'd like to move as in the papers, but I've got a number 6 to add on to those as well.
Right.
So as the 5 are written there, and there's just a slight contradiction in those points as opposed to the terms of reference. For example, in 3.14, we say the chairperson must be nominated, but in this part we say the chairperson must be elected. So my point 6 would be to adjust the terms of reference to say that the chairperson must be elected, a councillor must be elected as chairperson rather than nominated. So it's only a minor technicality, but just tying that up in the resolution there. And that then matches the rest of the resolution. Sorry, to Mr. CEO, if you want, page 101, if you have a look at 3.14 as an example of that, but it flows through all of them.
Yep. So that you've just moved that with as an alternative motion, adding that in straight up. It's not an amendment per se. It's you move the alternative motion. So all you need is a second, or you just work through.
Okay, so could I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Would you like to speak on that, Councillor Dickerson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is obviously tidying up from a month ago when we've now got the council representatives, a minimum of 2 for each of those committees, and the chairperson is a councillor, which I think is sensible, and then a councillor will be elected as a chairperson at the first meeting of each of those committees. So well done to our staff for going through, tidying that up after we deferred that from last month, and I think just that little bit of extra tidy up there makes it match the resolution we've got there. So well done all round.
Any further debate? I now put the motion to electronic voting. I'll now close the voting. Yes. I declare the motion carried unanimously. Item CSC 25/15, land classification, part of 43 White Street and lot 4391, DP 129 4801 Delta Road, Dubbo. Do I have a motion for this? Councillor Black. And a seconder? Councillor Wright. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Black?
No, thank you.
Any further debate? I'll now put the motion to the vote. I'll now stop the voting. Why does it do that? Is that right? Declare the motion carried unanimously. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Item CSC 25/16, change of date for the 25th of November 2025, Ordinary Council meeting due to the Local Government Annual Conference. Do I have a motion? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an alternative motion to CSC 25/16.
Yep.
That the November Ordinary Council meeting be held at the Wellington Council Chambers on Tuesday, November 18, 2025, commencing at 5:30 p.m.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor?
No, thank you. I think it's self-explanatory. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further debate? I'll put this motion to vote. I'll stop the voting. I declare the motion carried unanimously. What do I have to do with this one? Okay. The next item for consideration is deemed to be confidential. Under Section 10A of the Local Government Act, the next items being items CSC 25/17 have been identified as likely to be discussed in a closed session of Council. Can I now have someone to move us into confidential session to deal with the confidential items? Okay. Councillor Cowley. Seconded by Councillor Twinton. We've had no applications from members of the public to make their representations regarding whether the meeting should be closed to the public. The streaming will now be turned off. And it's 6:40, 6:39.
6:39.
Committees return to open session at 6:39 p.m. Welcome back. I now ask the Governance Officer to play the resolutions from the confidential session. There are no further items for consideration of the Corporate Services Committee, and I declare the meeting closed, the time being 6:41 p.m. Web streaming has now been completed, and thank you for your attendance. Please stop the web streaming.